called Coming in Hot. And the idea and the concept behind this series that we're doing is just trying to talk about the kingdom of God and what it's supposed to look like, and how you and I have been invited into that we, if we are followers of Jesus, we're part of a different kingdom that has a different plan and a different purpose. And there's so much involved in that. And so we're just kind of talking about different aspects of that. So we figured this week we would change it up a little bit rather than having one of us on stage talking to you. I feel like we would do a little bit of a Q&A. So I've got my buddy Eric with me. So Eric is a small group leader. A lot of you guys may know him if you see his beautiful face. You may know him and have recognized him. I know, Eric, you spoke a couple of months back, 1 week at Reckless, and talked through finances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, Eric's been involved for a period of years with a group of guys who are now seniors. And so he and I are just going to have a conversation, talk about this next aspect, something that really is pretty important, pretty key, especially now in the time of just our culture that we find ourselves in. We're going to talk a little bit about hope over the next few minutes. So, Eric, before we do that, maybe for students that don't know you, that are watching, let's just take a minute, maybe introduce yourself, share just a little bit about your story, and just a few bits of information that can kind of give them an idea of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Eric, and I'm a small group leader. I got senior guys, and I've been serving at Reckless now. This will be my 4th year. Definitely didn't see it going this way with COVID or anything, but we're making the most of it, and trying to stay in touch with my guys and touching base. And but a little bit about me. So I accepted Christ when I was 8 years old, and I was baptized when I was 11 years old. And as soon as I fully was able to understand what both of those things actually meant, I couldn't wait. I'll never forget. I was in an Awanas program and at a church on a Wednesday night, and we went through our little pamphlet for the night, and we finally got to baptism and what that meant. And it was a totally new concept to me. And I remember, I'll never forget. I just remember, I'm like, oh wow, that, like, I'm supposed to do that as a Christian. Well, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. Yeah, baptize me. So like that night on a Wednesday night, I rushed into the pastor's office, and he's just there doing normal work, right? And rushed into his office. Hey, I heard I'm supposed to be baptized. I want to be baptized. Can we do it tonight? And he just started laughing. He's like, well, we scheduled this. He's like, let's get it on the schedule for you, right? It's similar to what Westridge would do, right? And so I remember, like, as a kid, it felt forever, because I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks from then that they scheduled it out. And so I accepted Christ when I was 8. I was baptized when I was 11. Church and just having a fellowship with Jesus has just kind of been something that's really been there, but it did not come from my family. I actually grew up in a very, very broken home. My parents are divorced now, but when I was younger, like 8, 9, 10 years old, both my parents were together, but my dad was a very absentee father, was not there like he should have been. And both of my parents are convicted felons and drug addicts or ex-drug addicts. And so I grew up in a home where I would walk in on my father doing very heavy drugs in front of me. He would wake me up in the middle of the night, going through my drawers and stuff, just as a side effect of the drug, just being very paranoid. But yeah, so my family didn't really live a life that said, you should go to church and you should have a relationship with Jesus. They didn't have anything against it. They just weren't overly promoting it. And so whenever I met some kids down the street who became my lifelong best friends, we're still friends to this day, over 25 years. And their grandfather was the pastor of the church, and they invited me to go to church. And so I went, and that's where I really learned about the gospel and came to know Christ. And then from there, the rest of my family got to see me grow up and be different than the rest of the family in a lot of different ways. I've never done drugs. Almost everyone that's older than me in my family has gone to jail or prison, has been on probation. I've never had to do with any of that stuff. And really, for me, I always tell people my moment of clarity was sometime around 11 or 12 years old. God gave me this, not necessarily like a vision or whatever, where it was like very clear, but it was almost like God spoke to me very, very clearly. It was just a thought that I knew wasn't my own. It was coming from God. And he said, Eric, you see the way your life is, and you see the way that your life could be when you compare it to your friends and other kids in your neighborhood and how their families are living. Because I knew I was not part of a normal family at all. Like every family has problems, but mine really had some messed up problems. And so God just gave me that vision that say, hey, you know, if you want more, follow me, do good, avoid all the things that they're doing, which is a very sinful lifestyle. And, you know, you'll come out on top, and you'll have so much more than this. And thankfully to this day, I can say that that's very true. I'm married. I got a son now. He's 1 year old, and we have a beautiful home. My wife and I, we both have our jobs, even in the midst of COVID. And so God has just been faithful and loving, and he has just blessed us over the years, you know, through and through and through. He's never failed us. But there was a time where I was homeless, and I remember coming home one night from basketball practice and finding out that the house I was living in just 4 hours ago is no longer our house, and I can't go in there. And I spent that night sleeping in the car. And then I spent the next 1 year living in a motel room. I'd get up, I'd go to school, I'd come home, and my home was a motel room that my parents were paying for week after week after week. And I guess the last thing I'll say, just to really just cherry on, you know, top, is I came home one day when we were living in that motel room to find out that my mom was leaving my father for some man she met at the gas station. That was the only history I had about him. She met him at the gas station up the street. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And so that was just kind of it's just my childhood. I just had a whole lot of ups and downs, very inconsistent parts. And ultimately, it wasn't too long after that, my grandmother stepped in, she took over, and I spent 8th grade through 12th grade living with my grandparents. And that was really where I had some stability and was able to focus on my grades and graduate. And then when I was 19 years old, I was out on my own and haven't looked back. I had my own apartment, working full time when I was 19. And put myself through college and all of that. So I had in short, I had a really, really rough childhood. And, but today, like, life couldn't be better. And I guess I really want to share that, because if you ever needed reason to have hope, and like something tangible or someone, you know, that's close by, like, I'm living proof of that. Like I've been through the dark, and I've come out on the other side. And it wasn't because of me, it was because of Jesus. You know, gave me his word. I listened to it. I accepted it. I followed it. I avoided the sinful lifestyle. And like I said, like, he's blessed me beyond measure, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
That's good, man. That's good. Well, I don't think it's any accident that your voice is the one that's, you know, a part of kind of taking on this topic and talking about hope, and for you, and your story is what it is. Like, you've gone through all those things that have left you hopeless, and yet you found the thing that you can hang on to. And so let's just dive into the conversation. I think the reality is, especially now with all the stuff with COVID-19 and just the culture we find ourselves in, I think people are more desperate for hope than maybe any other time. I feel, it almost in a lot of ways feels like people are feeling more hopeless than ever before, depending on who you talk to. So yeah. I guess my question would be, why do you think that is?
Well, so the problem is people put their hope in worldly things, and they're not getting their hope from God, right? You know, some people, it's kind of to, you know, where you find your identity. You know, a lot of people, they find their identity in their job, or they find their identity in their friends, or their money, or their possessions, and that's where they also get hope from. And when you get hope from worldly possessions, things that can fade away and be destroyed and be taken away overnight in the blink of an eye, then that you're not really anchored to something solid. But, you know, with the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, that's something that's solid and can't be taken away. That's something that has happened, whether, you know, like, obviously we want you to believe it and accept it. But the reality is, when I talk to people who lack faith and lack hope, something I say is, it's like, look, if you go and get in your car right now, you're not going to check to see if the brake lines were cut before you get in, right? You're just going to assume that your brakes are going to work because they've never failed you. But the reality is, Your brakes are going to do whatever they're going to do regardless of your belief of it, right? You can think that they're not going to work, but they're going to work if they're going to work. Or you can think they are going to work, but they're not going to work if they're not going to work. It's the same thing with the resurrection of Christ. Whether if you believe it or not, it doesn't change the fact that it's true. And the same thing with the existence of God when people struggle with that. Whether if you believe it or not, it doesn't change the fact that it is still true. And that's really what I would say about hope. You know, when you put your hope in something that is true, regardless of people's perception and regardless of somebody's opinion, it's something that's anchored, it's solid, it can't be taken away. That's where you really have true everlasting hope. And because, you know, like the song says, because he lives, I can face tomorrow, right? And that's true because Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. I do know that tomorrow's not hopeless, and I do know I can pray and I can ask and I can receive, and he's going to be there for me, and I'm not going to be alone. And anything I'm struggling with, he'll pull me through it, and we'll get to the other side. And that's real hope. That's really where you should be putting your hope.
Yeah, that's good. It is interesting. Now think about the student who may be watching this, and you think, man, I'm putting my hope in that relationship, right? Whether it's a guy or a girl, and this is going to carry me through, and we're going to get married, and it's going to be great. And then whenever it falls short, you feel hopeless, right? Or same with the job situation. You think of, and this job is secure. This job is going to last forever. This job is, makes me happy and content and that kind of thing. And then it's stripped away because of a virus or whatever. And all of a sudden you're standing there holding something is no longer there that doesn't, it doesn't give you the hope that you thought it was going to give you. Right. So it is interesting that when we tie our hope to things that are temporary, to things that really could be taken away from us just like that, we all of a sudden realize how shaky the ground is underneath us. And I don't want to paint a kind of a brush over this, but in Ephesians 2:12 basically says to live without God is to live without hope.
Yeah.
It really does come down to that. Like, are we trying to find hope outside of God, or are we trying to find it in our relationship with God? Right. And in so many ways, that really does dictate whether we find hope or whether we don't.
Yeah.
So we talk about like Jesus coming in and ushering in his kingdom, right? So this whole series of coming in hot, like the idea of Jesus bringing his kingdom onto this earth and into our lives. What is it? What is so significant about his kingdom bringing us hope? Like, why is it so necessary for Jesus to usher in his kingdom and for us to live a part of his kingdom in order to experience hope?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, but it's a good one too. So, so with us, so, all right. So if I was talking to my small group guys right now, and this came up, I would start like this, and I would say, all right, for us as Christians, and then when I was 8 years old and I accepted Christ, for me, the end goal was I want to go to heaven. Right. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's ideally we all want to be there, and accepting Christ and having salvation is that's amazing. That's a wonderful gift we get. But that's really just the start of it, right? Because being in heaven is being, in his family, in his kingdom, and worshiping God forever. But see, in the end times, there's going to be this 1,000-year reign of Christ, where Jesus is going to come down, and he's going to be on top, and there's just going to be 1,000 years of just his rule. And I think about that when somebody explained it to me before, and I'm not an expert on the end times or anything like that, so please don't read too much into this. But when somebody explained that to me, they were kind of like, think about the world being restored to Garden of Eden conditions, right? Like if when Jesus is here and he's sitting on top, and you can visually see, oh man, he's like 500 feet away. It's like, think of it like just everything just being perfect because he's got it, on lock. Really what I would say is it brings us hope because it's like the short version is better days are coming. Like his kingdom is ultimately what we all should long for and desire, because the kingdom of God is where is really where we're meant to be. It's what God's, God really has a desire to be with us, has a desire to have a relationship with us, and ultimately, we're going to be forever with him, when you're a part of the family. And so being part of the family and being in the kingdom, those are better days ahead. And so it's huge that, he needs to usher in his kingdom.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. One of the thoughts I had was just thinking through, man, you think about in history, like all these kingdoms of earth that you thought, like back during the Roman time period. I mean, people probably swore that like Rome was that kingdom was gonna live on forever, right? I mean, no one was ever gonna take down the mighty Roman Empire, and yet you look now and it's like, man, they had a great run, but it came to an end, right? And you think of all these great kingdoms over the year, earthly kingdoms, they had a beginning and they had an end. They had a rise and they had a fall. And you think if you take God's kingdom out of the equation, what are you and I living for? We're living for whatever earthly kingdom we find ourselves a part of, right?
Right.
Would be the United States, which is a great nation, and God has blessed it, and it is a superpower on the earth or whatever. But there was a beginning, there was a rise, and who knows? Like it may seem impossible now, but there may hundreds of years from now there may be a fall, there may be an end.
Yeah.
The United States of America. And so, like, if you're judging just by history, like that is true of every kingdom. Kingdom. There's not one that has existed since the beginning of time that is continuing to go and continuing to reign and just be just as powerful as it's always been. There's always a beginning and an end. And so, like, that doesn't necessarily inspire any kind of hope for us to feel like, well, we're going to experience life just as part of some temporary kingdom. So you think about, just like you said, I mean, Jesus has come to restore back to the beginning, back to what was true of our relationship and our connection with God at the beginning of time, and back at the beginning when he created, Adam and Eve in the garden. And so God bringing in his kingdom in essence is to restore that, like how life is and how life was created to be, how God meant for things to happen, with us being closely connected with God, for us to experience peace and life and hope and joy and all the things that only he can bring through a relationship with God. And so it's to reshift our focus off of the temporary, off of the earthly stuff, and onto what is permanent, what is eternal. What will not have a rise and a fall, what will not have a beginning and an end, but that will always exist. And it's just cool to think that we are a part of the kingdom. Yeah. Like when we put our faith and trust in Jesus as Savior, like our hope is in an eternal kingdom, God, the creator, who is in control and the overseer of all.
Right.
And it will never end. It will never fail. And so we have that hope in that relationship, that connection with God, that he sustains all of our needs and gives us everything that we have. Yeah. And it will not be taken away.
Yeah, that's a great illustration. Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, I think that hits the nail dead on the head.
So I think it gives us hope. Like you said, it's an eternal thing, right? I mean, it's one day we will spend eternity with heaven, but it is also the here and now, right? It is also like God's kingdom has come here. And so all the things that Jesus was about and the character, like God wants to bring all those things into our life for us to experience the power of who he is and that relationship with him, for it to go beyond that, like into the lives of other people.
Right.
But it was a huge part of that for us to know that it is not just a temporary thing, but it's an eternal thing.
Right.
So let's talk about the practical. Because that's great in concept, and that's awesome. Like to think, just conceptually, like that we get a chance to rule and reign with God forever, and that we have that hope. But what does that practically look like? Like, what does it look like for us to live with hope each day, even when it seems like our circumstances are difficult, like what we may find ourselves in this stage of life in this day and age?
Right.
So what would you say to that?
Yeah. So, Yeah. So when it comes to being practical about having hope, I mean, the first thing I would say is, well, statistics and history is on your side. I mean, chances are, this is not the end. Chances are we're going to get past this. There was a beginning to the coronavirus, to COVID. There's going to be an end to it, and things will get back to normal. I mean, when you speaking practically, when you just look at it from a very logical standpoint and you rationalize it and you look at the numbers, you can say, yeah, this is probably going to get better, right? So that should give you a little bit of hope. But secondly, obviously, believe the word. Whether if this is the end or not. As a member of the royal family of God, being his son, being his daughter, it's not the end for you. You're going to be okay either way. Jesus didn't necessarily promise we would never have trials or tribulations, but he did promise he would always be there with us. And so you're not alone. And you should take comfort in that. And then obviously, continue to study the word and pray for sure. The power of prayer cannot be underestimated at all. God wants you to pray. God wants to hear from you. And just real quick, talking about practical and a little bit more about my story. So I've been working since I was 16 years old, and I'm 30 right now. So that's 14 years, not 40. That's 14 years.
You old.
Yeah. Thank God it's not 40. That's 14 years of just nonstop working, basically. Like once I started, I never stopped. And in that time, I had some arbitrary goal where I never want to lose a job. And then you just realize, like, that's not entirely inside of your control. You can work as hard as you want, but something like COVID hits and boom, you're out of a job, and it's not your fault. But I found myself over the last 14 years being unemployed 2 times. And both times I resorted to the same solution, and both times it worked without fail. And that was, I do pray, but I'm not always the best at necessarily taking the extra time to get down on my knees and do it. It's more so like I might just sit where I'm sitting now and bow my head and close my eyes and pray. And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes, like whenever, I don't know, like if you take a little bit of an extra action physically, maybe you get zoned in a little more. I don't really know. But all I know is this. During the times where I lost my job and I had no idea what I was going to do, I hit my knees, got as low to the ground as I could get, and I prayed as hard as I could possibly pray that, God would pull me through it. And the first time I lost my job, I had severance pay for 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks later, I had a job again. So I was only unemployed for 5 weeks, and I only saw a period of no money for 3 weeks, and thank God we had savings. We were fine, God brought me through that, And the second time I was unemployed, it lasted a little bit longer, but then I ultimately ended up with a job making more money than I've ever made in my life. And I've been part of a team where I've been in the company newsletter. I've been awarded like plaques and trophies for my hard work and effort. They really value me as a member. And so the point that I'm trying to make with all of this is that we often hear, oh, you need to just pray about it. And then we brush over it and don't really think about it. But the reality is, like, that is the answer. When you're worried, when you're stressed, when you don't know what's coming tomorrow, and you're trying to say, okay, like, how can I get through this? Spiritually, practically, however you want to word it, praying is that's how you're going to get through it. And tell God specifically, very specifically, God, like, I want this to end. This is what I need. This is what I want. He knows what you need before you ask. He just wants you to ask. So that would really be my practical advice.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking a little bit about like the early church. Mm-hmm. You think about, when Romans 5, says that, kind of rejoice when you face these trials, for that the trials can produce endurance, patience, hope, character, hope. Like, hope is the last thing to come, but hope is only a result of like the trials and the things that you go through. And you think about the early church, like how different they were from us. Like, they expected trials, they expected suffering, they expected to have to endure and go through difficult circumstances. And they rejoiced in that, knowing that at the end that was going to give them the hope that they needed, that was going to produce that hope in them. And I feel like for us, we're the opposite. Like we expect happiness. We expect things to go well. We expect no trials or no pain or no suffering.
Yes.
We expect you to naturally have all that stuff. And then when it doesn't happen, then we're frustrated, kind of thing. And you just look at like how Jesus has set it up. Like we have the hope, but the way for us to really get that a lot of times is through the trials and the things that we're going to go through, to really realize that, you know what, all these other things that I've trusted in and try to find hope in are temporary and they're fleeting. And the only way sometimes we experience that is when we lose it, right? When a job gets taken away, or when a relationship fails, when stuff doesn't go the way that we think that it should. And it's to realize that, man, the only thing that's going to produce anything lasting in me is my relationship with Jesus. And that's the hope that God wants me to hang on to. So it really does. I think it comes down to every day waking up saying, today I'm not going to find my hope and my significance in temporary things. I know that I'm a part of an eternal kingdom, a God who rules and reigns, that reigns right now, will reign forever, that nothing can overtake him.
Yeah.
Nothing that's outside of his control. And I'm living within that. So no matter what I'm up against, no matter what I'm going to face today, I've got the victory. Like God is bigger than it. And I'm a part of a kingdom that is not going to fade, is not temporary. And so, man, you think of even beyond that, like, now, God, I'm connected to you. I'm in a relationship with you, the creator of the universe that no one can overcome. And so you desire for me to have hope and victory and freedom and experience patience and to experience strength, that my hope in you gives me comfort no matter what I'm up against today. So, that practicality, like it just shifts your total mindset from the moment you get out of the bed every day to know that, all right, I'm not going to find my hope and my significance in temporary things, but I'm going to find it in my relationship with you and as part of your kingdom. And so when it comes to that relationship, it may, God, you won't. When it comes to this job, God, I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for this check that's going in my bank account. But God, if it fails tomorrow, if it falls short tomorrow, I know that you're going to provide. I know that you're in control because I'm a part of your kingdom. I'm a part of, the God who is in control over everything. Mm-hmm. So it really does, like no matter what aspect of life you look at, it impacts everything because you understand that God is in control. God is ruling and reigning over all of it.
Yeah. If you ever met somebody who seems to like always be happy, that would be my mother-in-law. Actually, she's called the happy lady in Douglasville. But if you ever met somebody who just, no matter what's going on, no matter what, they are smiling, they are happy. That's the secret right there. It's because they know, like, look, man, God's in control. Like, it's not like it doesn't. I mean, like, it might be inconvenient. I don't have money to put gas in my car, but at the end of the day, like, that car is gonna not exist one day. But I'm gonna exist. God's gonna exist. Like you said, those things are temporary, but God's permanent. And his love is permanent, and his kingdom's permanent, and that's really where we need to dwell put our focus and really dwell on the fact that that's where our hope lies, and that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and it's not easy.
No,
right?
No, not at all.
And just wave a like some pixie dust, and all of a sudden worried about it, like everything's a Disney day, right? I mean, it's not like that. Like you still experience crappy days. Like life sucks sometimes, and it's not easy. Difficulty. You go through difficult moments, and the early church knew that. Like they had to endure, they had to push forward, they had to trust God, but they knew that there was a reason that God was in control. So even if I'm going through this, even if I'm dealing with this difficult situation, I still have hope. Hope is not taken away from me because my hope is not in that thing that was taken away. It's in someone who is greater and bigger. Yeah. And I think, like, for us, maybe this is where we kind of land the plane. Like, I think the world is watching us, right, as the church, to say, if they don't see hope in us now, right, in days when this, this virus is spreading like wildfire, and people are losing jobs, and there's all this fear and craziness about what's next, and all these people are hopeless. And if they look at the church and we're the same way, and we're not sustained by the hope in something greater.
Yeah.
What good can we provide the world if we can't provide it?
Right.
Yeah,
I agree with that 100%. To piggyback off that, I mean, you're always being watched. I mean, but especially if you're a self-professed Christian, you're going to be watched. People on my team at work, they know I'm a Christian, and my boss, who is not a Christian, even he has this standard of me now. He's not a Christian, but he does have a standard of what he thinks a Christian is, and he holds me to that standard. And one day I was talking about, I don't even remember the context. It was something along the lines of being worried about this may not work, or man, what happens if whatever, or what if we lose our jobs, or something like that. And his response to me was, Eric, well, either way, you're fine because you're a Christian, so you're prepared for stuff like this. And this is coming from a non-Christian, which, I was like, wow, he's right. I mean, he's right. But it's one of those things, like, we got to be careful for sure. All eyes are definitely on us. And not only do we have a reason to have true hope, everlasting hope, because we're anchored to Jesus, who is everlasting, but we also should be able to have that hope with confidence and know that it's not in vain. And this is a time to really shine for other people. The verse that I wanted to share that we were talking about beforehand was Isaiah 40:31, and I just love this. And this is the NIV version because it uses the word hope. Not all the ones use the word hope, but since we're talking about hope, I wanted to use this. So it says, Isaiah 40:31, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And to me, those are just some of the most encouraging words you could possibly read at any point in time, but especially now. And I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, dude, thanks for jumping in and just sharing your thoughts, just your heart with students. So students, as we sign off here, we love you. We hope that you have an amazing week. We hope that you are inspired and filled with hope, and knowing that you are a part, through a relationship with Jesus, you're a part of God's kingdom. And it will not fail. It will not fade. It will not fall apart. No one will be able to overtake who Jesus is. And so he is in your life. You have a connection, a relationship with him. And so you have hope today because of that, no matter what your circumstance is. And so just know that we love you. We're praying for you. We hope you have an amazing week. And we will see you guys again next time.